Hi, good afternoon. I'd like to take a few moments to talk to you about an opportunity to study aspects of the Revolutionary War that are probably often overlooked. And that is what life was like in the late 18th century in the American colonies. For that, I'd like to talk about George Washington and a tour of his Mount Vernon estate. Mount Vernon is located in northern Virginia, near the town of Alexandria, along the banks of the Potomac River, and it is Washington's ancestral home. Many of us as historians and scholars know that Washington is often considered to be the founding father of our country. He was the first president of the new republic. He was the commander of the military forces during the Revolutionary War. To better understand the significance of Mount Vernon, however, we should look at what it represents from the perspective of the Revolutionary War. First of all, it was a working plantation during the late 18th century. The current museum and facilities there allow students and scholars to see and experience what life was like. A plantation was a self-sufficient entity. It was able to produce its own food. It was able to produce its own clothing in many cases. It was able to provide for itself in addition to the necessary cash crops that made it a profitable endeavor. Mount Vernon is notable not only for Washington's often changing agricultural system, his careful monitoring of what did and did not produce, but also things such as a large hemp operation which was used to make rope and sailcloth, which were a necessity in 18th century sailing vessels. Further, there was a distillery. In fact, at the end of the Revolutionary War, the distillery recorded that it had provided 11,000 gallons of rye whiskey throughout the new states, making it one of the largest distilleries at that time. Another aspect of plantation lifestyle was, of course, slavery. At its peak, Mount Vernon had approximately 315 or 316 slaves, depending on the source and the records. And the treatment of those slaves varied depending on who the witness was. This gives us insight into the reality of slavery, and that Washington was a slave owner for his entire adult life. However, his views on slavery changed significantly throughout his life, and no doubt the experience of the Revolution and ideas such as liberty and equality did begin to bear on him in addition to his religiosity. At the end of his life, in his will, he provided for the manumission of all slaves being held at Mount Vernon and his other properties upon the death of his wife, and further provided for the financial care for any disabled and elderly slaves upon their freed status. This is interesting because he is the only founding father to have made those provisos in his will and see them carried out. Finally, the insight that we can gather at Mount Vernon concerning the man and the commander-in-chief is not just in the battles that he won or the strategies that he fought, but into some of his insights. For example, Washington valued and highly sought intelligence information on the British, most famously the Culper spy ring, and Mount Vernon gives us the opportunity to see one of the code books that the spy ring actually used to encrypt its messages to and from Washington. Further, we find that because of Washington's own personal experience with smallpox and its prevalence as a battlefield disease, Washington sought to have members of the Continental Army effectively vaccinated by using a cowpox to create resistance among his troops during the period of 1777 and 1778. So the Mount Vernon estate, from a teacher's standpoint, provides not only great technological resources, web enablement, interactive video displays, interactive video and movies and filming. It has live actors. But most intriguingly for the student, it includes age-appropriate lesson plans, discussion questions, and learning activities. And for the scholar, it provides archives, library support, and professional research support. It should be encouraged for anyone who is a scholar of the period of the American Revolution to visit Mount Vernon and make use of these incredible resources which are locally available to us. I would encourage everyone to visit and enjoy the property and the ability to study and research further what life was like on an 18th century plantation during the period of the American Revolutionary War.